So this section is about classification. And what we're going to do is we need to figure out, based on characteristics, what kingdom they'll be classified in. Okay, every living thing on Earth is classified into one of these kingdoms. We're actually not going to talk about these two, Archaea or Protista. We're not going to talk about these two. We're just going to be focusing on these four here. So the first thing we need to do is look at some key vocabulary. The key vocabulary here first are these types of cells. So there's a prokaryotic cell and a eukaryotic cell, and they're opposites of each other. A prokaryotic cell does not have a nucleus. So a nucleus is the main area in the cell that holds the DNA. Alright, eukaryotic cells have a nucleus. Prokaryote does not. Alright, you see how it's missing a lot of stuff in there? This is just the DNA by itself. These two guys have a nucleus. It's actually this black dot right here. It's the nucleus. Alright, so pro, no, eu, nu. They kind of rhyme, so that's the way you can remember it. Pro, no, nucleus, eu, nucleus. Only bacteria are prokaryotic cells, and everything but bacteria are eukaryotic cells. Alright, and we'll talk more about that later. So that's the first thing. So you need prokaryote, no nucleus, eukaryote, nucleus. The next one is autotroph and heterotroph. We've already talked about these. Autotroph makes its own food, and it does photosynthesis, and they're only plants. So up here they do photosynthesis, so they release oxygen and take in carbon dioxide and water. Whereas heterotrophs have to eat the food that plants make, so this is this organic compound here, that's the food that it makes, and then they release carbon dioxide. Plants, and there are some bacteria, but we're going to say pretty much only plants are autotrophs, and heterotrophs are everything else. Alright, so far only bacteria are prokaryotes, only plants are autotrophs. So we got two things down. Now the next thing is a cell wall. So a cell wall is a structure on the outside of the cell. You see this thick green structure out here? This is actually a plant cell. So plants have cell walls that protects the cell and helps support it. Everything but animals have a cell wall. So now we're going to talk about, okay, so how do we distinguish these things, and what are these kingdoms that I'm talking about? So, Archaeobacteria, you don't really need to know. I'm just going to show that it's actually a kind of cool bacteria. These are colorful bacteria that love sulfur. These grow in those hydrothermal vents, but we're not going to talk too much about those, so let's skip that. Alright, eubacteria or bacteria. Sometimes you'll see it as eubacteria with the EU as our first kingdom. So the key characteristics you need to know here is that they are made of prokaryotic cells. They're the only ones, only of the four kingdoms we're going to talk about, these are the only ones that are made of prokaryotic cells. And remember, they don't have a nucleus. They're also just some other things. They're microscopic. You can't see them unless you have a microscope, and they're single-celled. Plantae is plants. All right, don't let the little AE at the end confuse you, but Plantae is plants. These are eukaryotes. So remember, only bacteria are prokaryotes, so everything from now on is going to be a eukaryote. They're the only autotrophs, so they do photosynthesis. And then they also have cell walls. They can be single or multicellular, but these two we're not going to be really worried about. These two are the key characteristics here, eukaryote and autotroph. The next kingdom is fungi. So our third kingdom here, so remember we're talking about four. Our third one is fungi. Fungi are eukaryote, so remember, plants, fungi are eukaryote, bacteria is pro. Now, plants were autotrophs in the eukaryote, but now fungi are heterotrophs. Alright, they are also, key thing here is they're decomposers. So they do eat for food, but they generally decompose to get their food. And they do have cell walls. So the only thing that distinguishes fungi from plants is this thing right here, that they're heterotrophs and decomposers, not autotrophs. Alright. So now our final kingdom is animals. Animals, again, are eukaryote, just like plants and fungi. And remember, bacteria is prokaryote. Animals are also heterotroph like fungi, but remember, plants were autotroph. And now these guys we do not have cell walls. No animals or humans are animals, we do not have cell walls. Alright, so that's what distinguishes us from fungi, because we don't have cell walls. So these are the characteristics that you have to memorize for each one. to be able to determine them, but I already kind of singled out the key ones that you have to look for: cell wall, prokaryote, eukaryote, autotroph, or heterotroph. So there's actually a good set sequence of 3 questions you can ask yourself whenever you come to a question. So if you get a question of, like, you find an organism that is that you don't know what it is, it's a eukaryote, and it's a heterotroph with cell walls, how do you figure that out? Well, there's 3 questions you can ask yourself. The first question you can ask yourself, is it prokaryote or eukaryote? Basically, does it have a nucleus? If it doesn't have a nucleus, then you know it has to be bacteria or eubacteria, because remember, prokaryote, no nucleus, and only bacteria is a prokaryote. If it's yes, then we have to ask ourselves a second question, because remember, animal, fungi, and plants are eukaryotic. Second question, is the organism an autotroph? If it's yes, then the organism belongs to kingdom Plantae. Remember, only plants are autotrophs. So now we already got that as a eukaryote. So now we're trying to distinguish between the 3 eukaryotes. And if it's an autotroph, yes. If it's no, then remember, it's going to be a heterotroph and make it eat its food. But there's 2 heterotrophs. There's animals and fungi. Alright, so first question, is it a prokaryote or eukaryote? If it's pro, it's bacteria. If it's eu, it's one of the other 3. Second question, is it an autotroph or heterotroph? As an autotroph, it's a plant. If it's not, it's a heterotroph, and it's either fungi or animals. And the last question will be, does it have a cell wall? If it has a cell wall, it's fungi. If not, then it's an animal. So going back to our original question, a eukaryote heterotroph that has a cell wall, well, we know it's a eukaryote, so it's not a bacteria. We know it's a heterotroph, so it's not plant. And it has a cell wall, so it has to be a fungi. Alright, so that's kind of, those are the characteristics you have to memorize, or you can kind of remember this sequence of questions to ask yourself.